In this video, we're going to look into how to create a walk cycle with this character rig that we created for a character. One of the things that I'm going to be referencing for this walk cycle is this guide that I created. Alright, so this shows you some of the different mechanics or poses that we're going to kind of explore during this video. Alright. So one of the things that you got to keep in mind is that we're going to be using 25 frames for this animation. Alright, so what you're seeing here, it's basically on what frames you're going to see those poses. What you're seeing here is pretty much true for any basic walk cycle. Basically you have a contact pose where this one, the heel of the foot is actually touching the floor. This one, the toes are touching the floor and the heel's a little bent. Our hips are a little down. Our shoulders are kind of counteracting this action. Alright. So, you know, if your left foot has a leg on the front, then your right one's going to be on the front, vice versa. Alright. The next one, again, is right after this one, we had the heel touching the floor, and this one it basically makes full contact on the floor. The back leg, again, it's gonna kind of stretch out a little bit, and it's, you know, at this point only the toes are gonna be touching the floor. And another thing that happens is that our hips kind of go down kind of all the way. So this is going to be an extreme pose, or at least one of them. On the passing, then basically this legs that we have on the back here is going to start kind of moving forward here, as you can see right here. And then this one stays planted and straight. Okay. And again, our arms are kind of doing the same thing, but in the opposite. Then peak point, again, this is going to be our second extreme pose. Our heel is going to be kind of lifting on the opposite leg. Alright, this one is still going to be not in full contact yet, but it's kind of almost there. And then another contact pose with the which is basically the opposite of this one. It's going to happen at frame 13, where the heel's touching the floor and the toe is kind of lifting with the heel up here. So the numbers that you're seeing here is basically the frames that you're going to be seeing in this pose. So one thing you got to keep in mind is that for this cycle to work, this contact pose that we're going to be doing in frame 1 is going to repeat itself in frame 25. And then at the end, when we play the animation, we're only going to be playing 24 frames, but we need to have that 25th frame with the same keyframes as 1 for this to work properly. Then on 4 and 16, you're going to have a down pose, but they're not going to be the same. The number 4 is basically going to be a continuation of what's happening at frame 1, but in 16 you're going to see a continuation of what's happening after frame 13. Alright, which again is the opposite of 13 is basically the opposite of the contact pose in 1. So in 16 you're going to see the down position for frame 13. Alright, and again, that's how these are divided. So in the passing frames are going to be 7 and 19. 7 is going to be the passing pose for the first contact. 19 is going to be the passing for the second contact, and same with the peak point. 10 is going to be the peak point position for the first contact, and 22 is going to be the peak point for the second contact position. Alright, so again, and I'm going to be referencing this in my lecture, so I'll put a link where you can actually find this. Let's see. Another thing that I want you to keep in mind is that this is something that I took from a YouTube channel called Endless Reference, sorry. And I just basically kind of broke down what this walk cycle of the guy, um, just to kind of show you that it's what this breakdowns that I did kind of it applies pretty much to any walk cycle. But this is what I got the reference, and if you ever need reference for any sort of animation, they have really good cycles and things like that. So Endless Reference YouTube channel for that type of stuff. Um, Alright, so now that we're here on the Maya file, again, want to make sure we are kind of keeping things organized. Basically, I don't want to see my joints or any anchor chains on this stuff. You probably want to keep that stuff here hidden in their own layer, or you want to hide it here. Alright, so make sure that the only thing you have access to is basically your controls, okay? Another thing that I want to make sure of, again, is that my timeline shows only 25 frames. So again, you kind of adjust that by changing the numbers here. So 1 and 25 here. Next thing I'm going to do is set up my preferences for this scene. Alright. And for this scene, I want to make sure to go into animation, and the tangents, again, that kind of really depends on your preference. If you're just learning a walk cycle or animation in general, probably keep them in plateau, because this will give you some really nice initial kind of splines to work with. Depending on who teaches you how to do the animation, some others might show you an approach using flat splines, in which basically you will be animating pose to pose, and then just kind of go in there, go in the in-betweens, and kind of clean that up afterwards by changing it to by changing the spline. So but I'm not going to be doing that. I'm going to let Maya do a little bit of the work. So and again, I'm just going to keep it on plateau for this. The other thing you gotta make sure of, go into settings and make sure that your time is at 24 frames per second. Okay, this is really important, because otherwise this is not gonna play correctly. And just go ahead and save those settings. Okay, I'm just gonna go ahead and save as, do a 01 to start with. Okay. So this is going to be a kind of in-place walk cycle, okay? So let's go back and looking at my reference, and I want to begin by creating the context poses that you're going to see in frame 21, 25, and 13. But let's begin with this one. So again, let's just explore what's happening in this pose. We're going to have our front leg contacting the floor with our heel here. Alright, and then the back leg, it's kind of somewhat straight out here, and it's going to be kind of contacting the floor, okay, with the toes, and the heels are up a little bit. Our hips are going to be moving forward with our leg, and usually the front leg will make that the hip kind of tilts up. So keeping that in mind, then what the torso is doing is basically kind of counteracting that a little bit. So since our hips are going to be at its high position when the front leg is when the front leg's like this, then our shoulders are going to shift, and then this side of the shoulder is going to be up while the other side of the hip is up. All right. And our arms are basically going to be kind of doing the opposite. So if we have left leg, up front, we're going to have the right arm up front. And again, our body is technically counteracting that, because if it doesn't, then we'll be off balance and probably fall on the floor or something like that. So the whole act of walking is kind of putting yourself off balance and then having your body kind of counteracting to make sure that you kind of stay standing in a way. So again, let's just start with the poses for 1 and 25. Okay. One of the things that I'm gonna do, it depends who shows you how to do this. Some people like to set a keyframe to everything. For instance, we're in keyframe 1, and rather than just setting keyframes to the specific channels that you'll be animating, they just click on shortcut S and set a keyframe for everything. I don't necessarily like doing that because, again, it necessarily creates keyframes for things that are not being animated. So, and it could create a little bit of a mess in your curve editor if you do it like that. So I'd rather just kind of create keyframes for the things that I'm actually animating for. So that way I only have to deal with those keyframes when we go into the curve editor, and not necessarily everything. So let's begin. Okay, so I'm going to I'm going to keep my auto key off for now. I'm just going to move, again, this is going to be moving on the Z axis, so I want to make sure I set a keyframe for this. Alright, and now notice that if I set a keyframe for 307 and then I decide to move my leg and then I move on the timeline, it's kind of gonna go snap to that 307 here. Now the reason for that is because there's nothing telling Maya that it's supposed to update basically any animation that I do on this control. So I'm gonna keep my auto key on, so I don't have to, any changes that I make to my foot here, they're permanent changes, or not permanent changes, but basically updating the keyframe that I set on that control. So again, I want to move this foot up. All right, I'm gonna put this 0.8. All right. Now keep in mind that I'm gonna try and use simple increments for my walk cycle. They might not work the same for your character, so the only thing that I will advise you to do is try not necessarily use whole numbers, but use numbers that you can kind of remember easy, because we are going to be using these numbers in a reciprocal way, so we can when we're doing the opposite of what's happening on this pose, we can just do a negative number or something like that. But more about that in a second. And then another thing that's happening in the first pose is that our foot roll, okay, I'm going to set a keyframe here for this one, is going to be up like this. Alright. And again, I want to use either whole numbers or something that's going to be easy for me to remember, so I'm going to stick to -9 there. Okay. Now we don't want to move this forward to a point where it's no longer touching the floor, or where the leg's too straight or something like that. Okay. You want to be in a position where at least there's a little bit of bend on your leg, and that's going to stop your cycle from having snapping movements and weird movements like that. Now this one is going to be far back, and again I want to go in here and just set a keyframe for this specific channel. And again, if I didn't address how you do that, you select the channel and just right click and just key on the selected. Okay. Now I don't want to make the foot control do the default for the or the bend of my toe. I want to actually control that with my foot roll. So I want to go ahead and key this one as well. Alright, there's going to be something along the lines of this. Again, I want to see a little bit of bend at this point. So let's just keep it at 4. Alright. Now that's just for my feet. I also need to bring the body down a little bit, so let's just select I have root control here that controls my torso here, so I'm just going to bring this down by maybe 0.05. Negative 0.05. Alright. And again, we're going to see a little bit of kind of a bend here on my legs. Make sure I keyframe that as well. I think this foot roll's a little bit too much. Let me just change that to either -8 or -7. I think that's going to be a little bit better. Alright, so this was, and again, keep in mind that I'm using a rig that, there's a video for this that shows you how to create this specific rig. So for you, it's going to be a little bit different. The next thing that I'm going to do is make sure that I move my pelvis forward a little bit. Okay. Let's just make this into a -15. Okay, nothing too extreme. Okay, so again, we're gonna make it so when this leg's moving forward, our hips are gonna move forward, and then another thing that we're gonna do is to make sure that we're rotating on the C-axis up a little bit. Okay, so kind of like that. Alright, let's just keep it at 4. Alright, and then what's going to happen with the torso, again, you can either address now or just be concerned with the bottom part of your body, but I'm just going to go ahead and set up the whole pose. Okay, so my arms are basically going to be doing the opposite of what my legs are doing, and then my shoulders, it's basically going to counteract to what the hips are doing. Okay, so in order to create that, let's just go ahead and I'm going to use this arm control and move my arm forward here. Okay, and again, for the arm, it's going to be a little bit different because it's going to be kind of moving on all the rotation channels there. So I might actually want to go in here and do select all these channels right here and select and keyframe what's going on here. But again, I can also go in there and just kind of and again, keep in mind that we're using an IK chain here. We also have control for the clavicle, so this has to kind of go down to be a little more natural. Let's just keep it at 23. Okay, maybe 24. Too much. Let's do 22. Okay. Okay. Now with this one's going to be a little bit maybe harder to do reciprocal increments for this, but we can also we can go in here, maybe kind of give it a try and see if it works. Let's just do 1.1. It's probably too far. 1.2 perhaps. Okay. 1.4 on the Y, 0.7 on the C. Alright. Alright, and we want to set a keyframe for this. And we also want to rotate the wrist a little bit forward. Okay. And again, I think for the arms, I'm gonna be a little bit more, not necessarily copy exactly what's going on here, but let's just go ahead and give it a try. 108. Okay, and then we want to go in here and key these. Okay. I'm not gonna focus on the fingers right now, but again, we based on the rig that I did, we actually have controls for these, and eventually we're gonna post them up as well. So, but I'm just gonna leave it like this for now. And okay. So, and again, what the torso is doing is pretty much counteracting what the legs are doing. So another thing that needs to happen here is that our torso needs to be again. Remember, our hips are kind of turning in the direction that our front legs is kind of going. So our torso has to counteract that and kind of turn into the direction that the left arm is kind of sorry, the left arm is kind of moving into. So this has to kind of move forward a little bit. And again, let's just do 9 here. Alright, I'm gonna key that. And I'm also maybe gonna bring this forward a little bit. Let's do 0.8 here. Okay. And alright, so, and this one is one that I'm gonna have to change because, again, remember, our pelvis is gonna be kind of going up in this direction, so this one has to counteract that a little bit. And I think I left it at 22, but it's probably gonna have to be up a little bit. Either that or the one on the left's gonna have to be really low, because what you want to have on the first on when, especially when you're kind of trying to counteract what the pelvis is doing, it's a V shape. So and again, just kind of imagine like a V kind of going through a character this way, like this. Alright, so V. So our hips are going to go in this direction, but then the torso or body kind of has to counteract that, so it's going to be going in this direction, where this is going to be up and this one's going to be down. So let's just go ahead and do that. And again, I probably want to set a keyframe for this as well. Alright, then I'm going to go into this one. It's going to bring the shoulder down. Let's do -19. Alright, or 20. Let's do -20. Let's keep everything else at 0. Oh, let's I think another thing that I want to do with this one is perhaps rotate it forward a bit, like this. So let's just keep this one at 10. Key that one. Alright, this one I want to move back. Let's keep it at 7. Let's keyframe all these both, and then let's just set up the this arm again, going the opposite. Okay. And again, the position of the arms here is a little arbitrary. We might not do a reciprocal kind of, when we go into 13 for this. But so again, I want to try and keep this as simple as possible. So -1.3, 1.4 perhaps. 1.2. Okay. This is -1.5. Let's do a -0.7. Too much. Let's do a 5. Let's stick to 6. Okay. Alright, I want to keyframe those. Key selected. And if I want to maybe do a little bit of rotation there with my wrist, so let's just keep this one. Just a -90. Alright, and again, you might end up doing something different with your poses. Doesn't have to be the same. Alright. And alright, so I'm gonna go into the front viewport and just see what's going on here. Alright, so let's just kind of, again, let's go and maybe fix this up a little bit. Again, our hips are up, so this shoulder needs to be up maybe a little bit higher. And let's just, because I'm going to have to rotate the Z for this a little bit up. Let's do 18 here. Okay. So again, it's kind of counteracting what the hips are doing. So we have a little bit of a V shape. Maybe I can actually lower this one a bit. Let's do negative 23 here. Okay. Okay. Then another thing that it's gonna end up happening is that, again, your head's gonna counteract that. But let's leave the head, maybe the hands, for later. Another thing that I want to do now is perhaps set another keyframe for my feet, and not necessarily, so they're kind of a little more, the legs are a little bit too spread out here. So I'm just gonna move this closer. Let's just do a like this. Okay. I'm just gonna set a keyframe for that one too, and let's just do the same one with this control. We're a little closer to here, and that's a point. Let's see, 2. That's gonna look good. Okay, and I can again set a keyframe for those. Okay, so now that you have basically posed your the contact for the keyframe 1, we want to take all those keyframes, basically copy them over and paste them on 25. So I'm just gonna go ahead and select everything, and let's see if this works. I'm just gonna go ahead and copy. Okay, and I just did that by selecting this keyframe. By moving here in the timeline, right clicking, copying, and then I'm gonna go to 25 and then paste. Okay, so basically anything that I set a keyframe on, okay, now has a keyframe on 25 as well. Okay, arms. Alright. So, and again, if we look at the diagram, that takes care of position 1 and 25. Okay. Now let's move on to our second contact pose, which is going to be in frame 13, which is this one, and it's literally the opposite of what's happening on this one. Okay. So let's just move on to frame 13. Alright, and again, you can do that. You can do this reciprocally by just taking whatever increments. Let's say again for this one, whatever you have on this one, and just basically copying it over to what you have on the other one. Just so it's basically the opposite of what you did on this one. Or you can just kind of do it freely and just kind of just basically recreate this pose in the opposite way. I'm just going to go ahead and do it reciprocally to what I can, because some of the things here might be a little more complicated than that. So let's start with the foot. Alright. So this foot is supposed to be having these settings. So 0.2, -1, and 4. So 0.2, -1, and 4. Okay. So now this leg is doing what this leg is doing, but now I need this one to be doing what this one was doing initially. So let's just go back to keyframe 1 and see what it is. -0.18, 0.8, and -7. So again, let's just see if I can remember that. This -0.8. Okay. No, I already forgot. And again, I gotta make sure that I do it on the right keyframe, because I kind of set it up on the wrong one there. So let's just do this one more time. And if it helps, just kind of write this down. If it makes it easier for you. Again, I don't have the greatest memory, so I actually have to kind of write this down so I can remember it. So again, going back to frame 13, and this one, it's going to be negative 0.18. This one's going to be 0.8. Alright, and the foot's going to be at a negative 7. Okay. Now, the reason why you're seeing it out like that is because, let's see, at least on this one, it's supposed to be an opposite of it, so it's got to be a positive. Alright. Same with this one. The X translation is supposed to be an opposite of it. Okay, so now if I go in here and play the animation, you're gonna see that it's basically doing this. Alright, so now we need to go and kind of do the same thing with everything else that we kind of set the keyframes on. Alright, so this one's gonna be pretty much the same, so we just kind of key the wrong one. We can set another keyframe for this is the root that controls the whole torso. On this one, again, this has to be a negative 4 and a positive 15 to do the opposite. So let's just go ahead and do that. All right. And again, make sure that you're keeping your auto key on, so you know the Maya knows that to keep track of those kind of shifts. All right. Let's just go up the list. This is at a 9, so it needs to shift to a negative 9. That's a negative 99, so that's wrong. Okay. Alright, so, and let's do the same with these. Again, this one is 7 and then negative 23. And this one is at a 10 and 18. So let's just go ahead and copy those. And again, I'm just trying to keep note of these. So let's change this one to 10 and 18. And again, I believe for these to work, they need to be pretty much the opposite. So negative. Okay. And this one needs to be switched to 7 and negative 23. Alright, and again, this is one of those cases where you gotta kind of make sure that you go in the negative way where you need to go the negative way. And I believe for this one, I'm actually supposed to be on a positive, at least for one of these. We'll be moving forward, back. Okay, so again, this one's supposed to be a negative because we want this one facing forward. Alright, but we actually want this one to be in a positive, so it goes up. And again, this is going to change a little bit because we haven't changed the position of our arms yet. But this is probably a little bit too much. Let's just kind of move it down a bit. And again, I just want to double check that this was an actual, that was at 18, so it should be at 18 here as well. But again, this is not going to work properly. Okay, so I think I might have made a mistake here. Let's see. Somewhere. Okay, and again, this is kind of one of the complications of using reciprocal um, numbers for this, because it gets confusing going between back and forth. And I think I ended up setting keyframes for this one that are supposed to be in frame 13 and frame 1, so just be careful with that. Alright, so let's do this. I'm going to go ahead and again, whatever number I have on this one, I need to copy to the other side and make sure that it's doing the opposite thing. So I'm going to pause the video and go ahead and do that for every single control, and I'll return as soon as I finish this. Okay. Okay, just finished my copying over the numbers that I had. Okay, and I did some of it I kept the same, some of it I kind of changed a little bit, but by now you should have the first contact position that again is the same in frame 1 and 25, and then the second contact, which is at frame 13, and should have something along the lines of a pre-robotic kind of cycle going on here. Okay. Alright, so the next thing that we're gonna do, it's kind of work on our extremes, which is the down and up. Okay. Well, actually, let's move on to the down first. Let's talk about the down. Alright, so we have 1, and then in the next position, again, basically at this point our legs are pretty much locked and they're not moving, so they pretty much need to kind of stay in the same position. Then our foot is going to come down, our heel's going to go all the way up, our hips are going to go all the way down here. Okay. And that's basically what we're going to animate. And then we need to do the same thing at frame 16, but it's not the same pose, but the pose that happens after frame 13, and you know, the opposite leg will go down instead of what we had coming from frame 1. So let's just go ahead and do that. So I'm going to go to frame 4. Okay. So a couple of things that I need to do here. Again, at this point our legs are kind of set in place, so we don't want it sliding like this. Okay. They kind of need to kind of stay in place. So I'm gonna whatever keyframes that I have on 1, I'm actually gonna copy and paste them on 4. Okay. And then I'm just gonna change this up a little bit. The foot roll is gonna have to be at 0. Okay. Okay. Same thing. And okay, let's just stick to this. Same thing I gotta do with the back leg. Again, same position as it was before. And I'm just gonna go ahead and paste it here. Alright. And just gonna roll this up to a point where the tip of my toe is lifted. Alright. And then we need to bring our torso down. Okay. So it's pretty much doing this. Okay. And again, I want to have some sort of easy to remember number here, so let's just do a 0.2. Okay, hopefully that's not too extreme. Alright, and again I want to do, okay, so we have this. We want to do the same thing at frame 16. Okay. So again, this foot needs to stay in the same position as in frame 13. Let's just go ahead and paste that. And 0. Okay. Same with this one. Let's just go ahead and copy, paste. Oops. Paste. Okay. And let's see, in 4 this one is at 9, so probably want to be at 9 here as well. Okay. And our hips, or I mean our whole torso, drops down to negative 0.2. So I need to make sure that's happening here as well. Okay. So we go from a contact position to a down position. Okay. Again, I'm just kind of letting Maya kind of do the in-betweening, but at some point I'm gonna have to come here and add kind of keyframes to this. But let's just worry about the legs for now. All right. And again, our hips are kind of doing what they're supposed to do because we already set the keyframes for our main contact poses. So then, let's focus on our peak point. All right. So the idea, let's just see which one we want to do next. Let's see. Peak point will be at frame 10 and frame 22. All right. So the idea of these of this one is that and again, let's just see what's going on. So our foot goes down here, stays in place, all right, and when we see the passing pose, the only thing that's moving it's our right leg here, but this one kind of stays in place, and when it gets to this point is when it kind of it starts lifting. Okay, so at 22, let's see, we want, sorry, not at 22, let's do 10 first. At 10, we want this back leg to be almost at the same position as 13. Okay, and this the right leg, sorry, needs to be actually kind of lifted a little bit because it hasn't made contact yet on frame 13 yet. Okay, so I'm going to actually copy 13 here, go to 10 and paste it. Okay, and I'm actually gonna move it up a bit. And again, notice that there is no keyframe for what that Y translate there. So that's something that we kind of need to account for in other in the other keyframes that we set up. So we're gonna make sure that we go in here and make sure we set a keyframe for it, because we don't want to do it any. If I set up a keyframe for it to move up here, it's gonna stay pretty much the same place through the other ones, because there's nothing to tell it that it actually needs to stay in place. So okay. So again, I just want to make sure that this stays where it needs to stay. Okay. Key selected and key selected. All right. So at this point it's supposed to go up a little bit. Let's just do 0.1. Okay. So it's pretty much doing this. Okay. It's the pose before it actually makes the contact. Okay. Now, pretty much the same happened. We want to do pretty much the same with this one. We want it to almost be at 13. Okay, so let's just copy this one. Let's just paste it here. But we don't want it to, again, it's not supposed to be in the same heel position just yet. The one at 13, it's a little higher, so this one needs to be lower a little bit. Let's just do 2, which is kind of half. Maybe let's actually do 3. Okay. Let's just see how that looks. Now, this one right here, we kind of need to move forward a little bit because it's not necessarily in the same position as 13 yet, and if we leave it like that, it's gonna look a little awkward right there. So we're just gonna move it forward a bit, all right, and just let the let's see. Just try that. That looks a little better. Okay. Now another thing that's happening here is that our torso is at its highest point. Okay, so our legs are pretty much almost kind of straight at this point. So it's going to be something along the lines of this. And again, we don't want to have completely straight legs because then we might see some sort of popping here. Let's just see. Let's just do something like this. And again, let's just kind of see what that's doing. Alright, see that? Again, we're always gonna see a little bit of a pause here at frame 25 because it's kind of repeating what's happening in frame 1. If you want to see what the cycle is actually going to be looking like, you kind of need to get rid of one of your frames here, go back to 24, and actually see the whole thing happening there. Alright? Alright, so but now we kind of need to do the same thing with frame 22, okay? Because we only have the peak point at frame 10, okay? Alright, and again, we kind of use the same position for this one before it actually does the impact, but we probably want to move it back just a little bit, just so it doesn't look like it's already in place. So something like 0.6 here. Okay, maybe not roll this so much. It's a little more natural that way. Okay, so now we need to repeat the same. We need to take whatever we did on 10. Let's just put it on 22. Okay, so let's just select this guy. All right, and again, let's just kind of write this kind of numbers down so we can just kind of copy it over that stuff. So 0.18, 0.1. 0.6, and foot roll at a -5, and the other one is at, again, I don't have a keyframe on this one at Y because this one is not moving up at this point, but it is going to now, so we probably want to go in here and make sure that has a keyframe on Y at every point here. Key selected. Let's just key it here. Okay. And let's just switch this to 25. Okay, key selected. Alright, so again, I'm trying to copy the numbers here for this one. So this one will be -0.2, 0, -0.8, and then a foot roll of 3. Okay, so at 22, let's see. This one's the one that kind of needs to be up front, so let's do a negative. This is going to be a 0.18. Okay, this one kind of needs to stay negative actually. Okay, translate at 0.1. Okay, because it's racing up here, and this is a 0.6 forward. Okay, and the foot roll is supposed to be -5. Okay, so it's lifting up. Okay, good. And then the opposite leg's supposed to be, let's see, negative 0.2. And again, this one, I think it's supposed to be the opposite here. Okay. Yeah. This is at 0. This is negative 0.08. Okay. And again, we might need to make sure this one is... This is not far enough. Okay, let's just see what I... Oh, I'm adding an extra 0 that doesn't need to be there. Okay, so now it's right, and then the foot roll is supposed to be at 3. Okay. Now the other thing that we need to do is make sure that our torso is basically at the same height as a 10, which again I can just gonna copy and paste this number. Okay. So now let's see what we have. Okay, and again, the only post that we haven't addressed yet, as far as what we've done so far, basically we have our contact post for 1 and 25. We have our down post for 4 and 16. We have our peak, which we just did, for 10 and 22, and then we have 13. We haven't addressed the arms. Again, we kind of letting Maya kind of do something in between for us, but we're gonna have to go in there and kind of fix it ourselves a little bit. And then we have the passing, and again, we're not sure what's happening at the passing, so let's just see what's happening there and if it resembles what's supposed to be happening here. Okay. And again, our foot's supposed to be passing here, and you know, the arms are kind of doing the same. So this one I'm actually just gonna let kind of Maya kind of deal with, and I'm gonna have to go in there and maybe change a couple things on the arms, but for the most part everything's kind of working the way it's supposed to. All right. So that's a pretty basic walk cycle there. So the legs are doing fine. Let's just go in here and maybe see how we can kind of fix the arms a little bit, because they kind of seem to be doing a little bit of a weird fold here, bend. But another thing that we need to do is kind of make sure that our head is kind of counteracting what the torso is doing, because our head usually doesn't kind of turn in the same direction as our torso. It actually kind of does the opposite. So let's just go ahead and do that. Alright, so let's just look at what our arm is doing. Kind of folding there and then going here. So maybe what I need to do is go to keyframe 7, which is again our passing, and just kind of making sure that this is down a bit. Okay, like that. So, and then we just kind of need to kind of, and again, that's gonna cause a little bit of a pop there. So then we can go into frame 10, kind of lift it up a little bit. Okay, and at frame 4 again, we probably want to keep it straight as well. So again, I'm only setting keyframes on where we have our poses, 4, 7, 10, and 13 here, and I'm just making sure that the arc of my arm is doing a smooth. Okay, there. See that? So like the first one is really good. Now I need to address it kind of moving forward again. So so then the next frame that we need to set keyframes on here is on 16. Okay. So again, we want this to probably don't want to straight right out to 16, but somewhere in the middle. So let's just stick to 19. Move it down. Okay. So we want to then go back and move this down a bit. Alright. And then 22. Again, it just seems like it's doing that kind of popping there, so we just want to move it up a little bit. And again, notice that I'm not kind of keeping an eye on this. I think for the arms are just going to be a little bit more of freeform animation at this point. Okay, so that's looking a little better. Alright, and again, 1 and 25 need to be the same. So now I need to do the same thing with this arm. Okay, that's looking really good. And you know, I can also go in here and maybe pose the fingers a little bit, so it's not awkwardly just kind of always kind of with the palm open the whole time. All right, so that looks pretty good. And all right, let's do this arm real quick. Alright, so let's go to pose 7 here, and again it's just kind of doing that folding there, so we want to straight this out, make sure that it's going on a nice arc, but then if we go back it's kind of folding at this point again. And again, I'm only going to be setting keyframes on the parts where I actually have on the timeline where I have the other poses set up. Alright, it just kind of makes it easier for you to kind of keep track of. So nice, and then 10 again, doing a little bit of a weird thing there, so we need to make sure it's maybe bending a little bit. And okay, let's just do a fold here. Alright, so that's nice. And then 16 down. 19, maybe put it down a little bit. Then 22, it's already kind of straightened out in a really awkward way, so let's just move it up a bit and then just see what happens. Alright, and then the last thing I want to do is just fold my fingers a little bit. Again, I don't need to do any sort of animation on these. Just keep them like that, keep it simple. Alright, so we addressed our legs, we have our hips are doing what they're supposed to do, our arms are moving fine, our shoulders are kind of counteracting what our hips are doing. The last thing I like to address here, it's basically what my head is doing. Okay, because again we want the head to kind of counteract what the what is happening here. So I'm going to go ahead and use my head control here. And let's just set keyframes on the Y. Okay. So I'm probably just going to set a keyframe. Let's just do -12 here. Alright. And I'm going to copy this one and paste it on 25. And then at 13 we need to be in a positive 12, so let's get rid of this one and just key here. Alright, so now that I did that, and again let's just make sure that the keyframes were set, the head's going to be counteracting and it's not going to be awkwardly kind of following the torso. Okay. Now that you have a walk cycle here, then we probably need to maybe go into our curve editor and do a couple fixes. So I'm going to do a second video where we look into that. But this basically shows you. This video showed you basically the basic breakdown of a walk cycle and how to create a walk cycle in Maya in 25 frames. Okay, and again, the reason why we're seeing an awkward pause here at the end is because we have 25 frames and the last one's basically the same one as the first one. So I'm going to go ahead and change this to 24. Place this. Alright. Now this is okay. This looks pretty good. And now, okay, we're gonna go. I'm gonna do a second video where we're gonna go into our curve editor. We're gonna try and clean up some of this stuff. Okay. Um, and just and try and maybe give it a little more personality there. All right, that concludes this video. Thank you.